Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to Women Who Rock with Success, a digital media source for professional and entrepreneurial women. Did you know that we can be found on Google Play, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Sam's Broadcasting, AutoCast, and more? Women Who Rock with Success airs live each Tuesday at 9 a.m. Central Time, followed by our latest brand, Women Who Rock Investigates. We handpick professional women in many areas who can provide credible information in their field to build your business and lifestyle. To learn more about us, just visit our website at www.womenwhorockwithsuccess.com.
And good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in for our 1 o'clock segment on today. This is your host, Ms. Diane Winbush, and of course our audiences know that we are a media mogul. We have different platforms for women and for men, and so one of them is also reform, and it's prison reform. And so it's one of our pet peeves, of course. And so our next guest that is in the studio, he will be talking about his experience from one part of the prison to the Bar Association. So everyone, welcome to the show, Mr. Jeffrey Deskovich. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. And so we're going to start by, we want to learn a little bit more about you, a little bit first about your childhood as growing up, and then as to how this came about of the wrongly conviction. So you can kind of start with some of your little hobbies when you were a child, and you know what you like to do and what have you. So you can go ahead and share that with us at this moment.
So growing up, I grew up in Peekskill, which is in Westchester County, New York. It was the suburbs, middle class, ethnically diverse. I would say I kind of lived a double life at the time. After school, I was like one of the main kids in the apartment complex and the surrounding area nearby. So kind of whatever I would suggest would be what we would do. With us, we're going to play basketball, we're going to ride bikes, we're going to go to the movies, we're going to play Monopoly, we're going to do video games or any number of other types of sports, swimming, etc. But that was after school. In school was a different story. The kids there were older than I was. And, I was really not into organized sports. I was not really into, parties and chasing girls. And I was kind of like on the outside of the fringes of the society there. And so, that was my life in school. And later on, as the story evolves, that'll become a factor.
Okay, great. And so you basically, in some aspects, you were the leader, and then when it came to school, you was basically actually, I wouldn't say a follower. I guess you were just, neutral, I want to say. So we want to get into the aspects of the wrongly conviction, because we know that there is a huge issue in the system, and I want to also say that's the reason why I'm going back for my master's in juris, even this fall in about a month, because some things need to be corrected. I won't be able to correct it all, but I do believe that those that have a prison reform positive mentality will be able to correct and be able to encourage others to be able to follow the same trend. So we want to talk about the conviction as to how you were exonerated.
Yeah, well, yes. So I was wrongfully convicted of a murder and rape. I was arrested when I was 16 years old for the murder and rape of a high school classmate. I got on the police radar because the police interviewed a lot of students from the school, and some of them told them that they might want to talk to me because, as I mentioned, I didn't quite fit in. That was how I got on the police radar. And in addition, I was a sensitive teenager, and the police interpreted my being sensitive, being emotional, as some sort of outward sign, like I was sorry for what I had done. So then, lastly, they got a psychological profile, which from the NYPD, which purported to have the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator, and I had the misfortune of matching that profile. So for about 6 weeks, the police would play this cat and mouse game with me, in which half the time they would speak to me as if I was a suspect, and the other half the time they would pretend like they needed my help to solve the crime. And they would say things like, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They asked me opinion questions to congratulate me that my opinions were correct. Now, my coming from a single-parent household intersected with this good cop, bad cop technique, because I began to look at the officers pretending to be my friend as like a father figure, and because prior to being a teenager, because I wanted to be a cop when I grew up, and so, that Jeff is this junior detective investigator helper, and that was how they were able to pull the wool over my eyes on that. And so eventually, they got me to agree to take a lie detector test by telling me they had some new information that had come into the police file, and they wanted to share that with me, and that would allow me to be more helpful to them. So the next day, rather than go to school, I went to the police station for the test. Instead, they drove me from Peekskill, which is in Westchester County, New York, to the town of Brewster in Putnam County. It was about 40 minutes away by car, so that meant I couldn't leave anymore on my own. I was totally dependent upon the police. There were 3 cops who came with me from Peekskill, but then there was also the polygraphist himself, who was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, Daniel Stevens, but he was pretending not to be a cop. He never identified himself as law enforcement, and he never read me my rights. I didn't have an attorney present. I wasn't given anything the entire time I was there. They gave me a 4-page brochure which explained the polygraph, but it had a lot of big words in it that I didn't understand. But then I figured that, well, I'm here to help the police anyway, so what does it matter? Let's just get on with it. And from there, they put me in a small room, and he gave me countless cups of coffee to get me nervous, and then he attached me to the polygraph, and then he launched into his third-degree tactics. So he raided my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again, and he kept for 6.5 to 7 hours. Towards the end, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." And so that really shot my fear through the roof. And at that point, the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and told me that the other officers were going to harm me, but that he'd been holding them off but couldn't do so any longer, that I had to help myself. Then he said, "Just tell them what they want to hear. You can go home. You'll go home afterwards. You're not going to be arrested." So being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, not thinking about the long term, instead just being concerned with my own safety in the moment, I was overwhelmed emotionally and psychologically, and then this threat, and then this false promise. And so I took the out which he offered, and I made up a story based on the information that he had given me in the course of the interrogation. By the time everything was said and done, I had collapsed on the floor into a fetal position, crying uncontrollably, and obviously I was arrested. So that was how I came to be charged with a murder and rape, which I did not commit.
Oh, wow. Now, that is devastating. Wow. I don't even want to just even piggyback on that. That is just totally devastating, especially when we trust the law in some aspects, and then when it comes to the interrogation, they will do everything that they can do to be able to exhaust, I guess, the person that they're trying to accuse in order for them to cop to a plea or what have you. That's weird. Well, it's not weird. That's just part of America. So even with that, through your process, you were able to come out of this. That's the important factor of it. You were able to come out of it. So even with that, when you got exonerated, and I'm pretty sure these. Yeah.
So I just wanted to explain how I got convicted first. I mean, that's just the arrest. I went to trial, which I lost. Oh. So the DNA test results didn't match me before the trial, which showed that semen found on the victim didn't match me. But the prosecutor got the medical examiner to commit fraud and claim that the victim had been promiscuous, which was a lie. But so in order to wrongfully convict me, he was willing to trash her reputation. Victim's family was not coming to court, so they had no idea what was being said about their daughter in court. And then taking it a step further, the prosecutor mentioned another person by name that he claimed had slept with the victim, but he never he never tried to prove that. He never called him as a witness. He never got a DNA sample from him. On the other hand, my attorney basically didn't defend me. He didn't call my alibi as a witness. He never explained to the jury the DNA not matching me. He never used that to challenge the conviction. He rarely met with me. He should have never represented me because of a conflict of interest. So this other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of the same public defender office, and specifically by the lawyer who was supposed to be supervising him on my case. So that conflict prevented the defense from asking him for a DNA sample or the defense from calling him as a witness. Lastly, the interrogation was not videotaped, it was not audio taped, there was no signed confession, just the cop's word for it, and as a result of that, when they came to court, they left the threat and false promise out of their story. My lawyer would not allow me to testify either, and so the end result of everything was that I was wrongfully convicted of a murder and rape, and I was given a 15 to life sentence because I had been charged as an adult, and I was sentenced as an adult, and I was sent to a maximum security prison where I would spend 16 years. And I lost 7 appeals. I got turned down for parole because I maintained my innocence based on maintaining my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility. Ultimately, I was exonerated by further DNA testing through the DNA data bank, which identified the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was only in the data bank because left free when I was doing time for his crime. He killed a second victim 3.5 years later, a school teacher who had 2 children. So my conviction was overturned on September 22nd, 2006. All the charges were dismissed against me on actual innocence grounds November 2nd, 2006, whereas the actual perpetrator was arrested and convicted of the crime.
Wow. So what position did that put the DA as well as your paid attorney in? I mean, I'm pretty sure after you got exonerated or you were coming up for exoneration, I'm pretty sure that they got news and wind of it. What position did it put them in? Was it basically like
I didn't have a paid attorney. I didn't have a paid attorney. What happened at the end was the Innocence Project agreed to represent me, so that was the first key. The second thing was that the district attorney allowed a different district attorney took office, and she allowed me to have the further testing. And then the third thing is we got lucky that the actual perpetrator's DNA was in the data bank. So all those things came together, and in order for me to be exonerated.
Wow, that's something. That is absolutely something. So we've discussed and talked about the incarceration. We've talked about the exoneration, and then also we want to be able to share. When did you decide to turn the exoneration into, look, I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to make a change. I'm going to make an impact on others. I want to help others. And I also want to be able to share with others how they can obtain services from me, or what have you. In regards to that, what was that point? Was it while you were incarcerated or when you knew that you were going to be exonerated, is that you made this pivotal point in your life where you wanted to turn from where you were basically to where you are right now?
Well, I kind of daydreamed about it within the last 2 or 3 years. I was in what turned out to be the last 2-3 years in prison. And I just remember thinking, man, if I ever get out of here, I'm going to become an attorney and help exonerate other people in the same position as me. But it was kind of just like daydreaming out loud because the odds of that happening, appeared to be remote. Then when I was exonerated, when I was released, when I did an off-the-cuff presentation for about 2.5 hours at the press conference, and I realized I could be part of the innocence movement without necessarily being an attorney. And so for the first 5 years, I was an individual advocate. So I was speaking across the country. I was a columnist for a weekly newspaper. I was doing regular media interviews. I was meeting with elected officials. I got a scholarship from Mercy College to finish the bachelor's degree, which I was a year short of at the time. Funding was cut for college education for prisoners. I decided to get an additional credential to help me in my advocacy work, so I got a master's degree from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice with my thesis written on wrongful conviction cause and reform. Now, during that time, I was simultaneously going through a lot of difficulties in terms of reintegrating because I was released with nothing. It turned out that it would take 5 years for me to be compensated, so I had to deal. So I didn't have consistent. I was never able to get gainful employment, so I lacked stability of housing. At one point, I was a couple of weeks away from a homeless shelter. I had to deal with the psychological after effects of wrongful incarceration. There was a stigma of having been incarcerated for 16 years. Wrongfully, yes, but still incarcerated. So, how much of that rubbed off on you? So there was that. The world was different. Technology was different. Cell phones, GPS, internet had not as yet been created. Culture was different. Cities and towns looked different. Different people lived there. So I felt like I was in a parallel world. It was kind of awkward when I'd meet up with members of my extended family because I had minimal to no contact with them while I was in prison. So I was different now, and I was older, and they were different also. So that was a difficult 5-year period. But then I was financially compensated, and I wanted to go to the next level. So I had just been able to nibble on the edges a little bit in terms of freeing people. I mean, prior to that, the bulk of my work as an advocate, like I described, was really limited to doing policy work and public education. But when I suddenly was compensated, I wanted to be involved in freeing people. I mean, prior to that, I could use my name in a press release for someone else's case, or I could show up in court for the visual impact on the judges, or I could write about a case as a columnist, but that's really just nibbling on the edges a little bit. So when I did get compensated, I decided to take $1.5 million from what I received, and I started the Jeffrey Descovic Foundation for Justice, which has as its goal freeing wrongfully convicted people as well as the policy work. So since then, we've been able to get 11 people home and wrongfully imprisoned. We helped pass 3 laws. I'm an advisory board member of a bigger coalition called It Could Happen to You, which the foundation is part of, and we were able to pass 5 additional laws, including independent oversight for prosecutors. We do policy work now in New York, Pennsylvania, California. I'm active in all 3 chapters. And at some point, it became not enough for me to sit in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to be able to sit at the defense table and represent some of the clients and make some of the arguments, hence going into law school and becoming an attorney.
Okay, great. So before we get into the Deskovich Foundation, I want to ask a question as to had you received as of yet an openly or public apology from you, especially from your defending attorneys as well as the DA and the prosecutor? Have they actually tried to meet with you face to face and say, "Hey, look, we're sorry, we got this wrong," and things? We did not sample all of the evidence, or we perhaps rushed to judgment. Did you receive any of those types of, I would think that would be a award achievement if someone would humble themselves and say, "Look, I got this wrong." So did you receive any of that?
Short answer is no. A slightly longer one would be that the judge apologized to me, that agreed to the exoneration, but that was not the judge that presided over the trial, which resulted in my wrongful conviction. I got an apology from the prosecutor in the courtroom and the district attorney, but that was not the district attorney when I was wrongfully convicted. That was not the prosecutor who wrongfully convicted me, and none of the other people involved ever apologized to me.
Oh, my goodness. Good grief. Wow. Okay. Well, hopefully they have been able to have a lot of time to be able to review, look, see, watch your speaking engagements and listen to your interviews as well. So perhaps maybe that's enough, regardless whether you had received it or not. So that's sufficient enough. So we want to talk about the Deskovich Foundation, and we want to be able to want you to share as to how does the step process or initiative process work, and that's in regards to do you all go and search out for those that you feel that are innocent, or do you allow those to come and apply? So, for example, with a prison reform organization that we have, everybody says they're innocent, and then after you read their file and their case, you'll see some things, some discrepancies in there, but then there are some things that's left out and what have you and things. And so that's something that I want to be able to ask in regards to that, how individuals can be able to apply for your services.
Well, people come to us, every time I do, media, whether it's new media or traditional media, or every time I do speaking engagements, I usually get a bunch of new applications. But, friends and family of people who allege they're wrongfully imprisoned, they hear of me that way. And I am, it's weird to say it, but I am kind of a legend in the New York State prison system. People there who go to the law library, they know who I am. So people do apply. They typically write us a letter. So that it starts from there. But, right now we have 10 cases that are active, and we have another couple hundred that have been waiting for a number of years just for us to screen it. So at the moment, we're not currently taking new applications because we're trying to dig ourselves out of that backlog. But we are actively, trying to do some fundraising so that we could, increase our capacity of how quickly can we screen cases, and, how many other cases could we then take on. But that's when we get the public support for that. We're working on 10 active cases right now, and even that's a little bit too much. And there's another 7 that are approved that are waiting. So that's what our situation is now in terms of that. But, long range, I would love to, to do this the right way, it's everything you need, from an executive director to, attorneys, paralegals, investigators, other essential personnel. It's a $1.3 million burn rate is what it is to do this really the right way. So right now, we went from paid staff to a bunch of volunteers and, attorneys that are looking for us to give them some good cases, which is a case that we've already screened where person's innocent and there's a potential route to victory that we've already mapped out. So, that's what we're doing now as opposed to not doing anything at all. But we are, again, looking to fundraise so that we could keep the volunteers as, supplemental to the main workforce, and, we'd be able to do things in a quicker manner. But long term, I'd love to have a office in each state and ultimately in each country, because I see wrongful conviction as a worldwide issue, and places where we do not hear about wrongful convictions, it's not because they're not happening. It's simply because nobody is working on it. But all that will be when we're able to get the public support that we need to expand in that way.
Okay, great. So with a couple more segments, this segment we want to kind of talk about prison reform, and so how close are we to it in regards to America? I know that that was one of the pet peeves for the president, that when he started talking about the Justice Safe Act, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And so, of course, that entails with, bail reform and what have you. So are we any closer, in your terms, are we any closer to making that work in America, because we see so much. We just saw the BOP chief on the hot seat with the House Speaker back here in April of 2021, and that's because of all of the things that have went on, during the COVID with prisoners and how they were treated, and of course there was a lot we lost in America due to the COVID, and there were no answers for the family. So you think we're a little bit closer, or we still got a lot of milestone work to do in that area?
I would say both. So, like in the documentary short about me called Conviction, which is on Amazon Prime, which is about my advocacy work and life post-exoneration, I use that platform to draw attention to a lot of disturbing things that I saw up close and personal beyond wrongful conviction. So I spoke about things like elderly in prison and, need for parole reform, whereby candidates whose rehabilitation is clear are repeatedly denied parole just based on what nature of the crime was, which is kind of like a complete abandonment of the idea of rehabilitation. I spoke about elderly people in prison and how the medical care in general is terrible in prison, but that the prison is particularly inept at treating the advanced medical needs and compassionate release when a person has been determined to be terminally ill, and how by the time a decision is made, they either passed away or they have a day or two left, and solitary confinement and mass incarceration, and people return to prison for like 1 or 2 years on technical parole violations, meaning that imagine someone returning back to prison because they're supposed to be home at 8 o'clock and instead they got home at 8:10, and so their punishment is to be in prison for a year or 2 years. So I talked about those things and, the need for college education in prison, whereas there's a 68% national average of recidivism rate, much lower for a college-educated formerly incarcerated person, which it's obvious why, because if you expand someone's horizons, if you equip them for gainful employment, obviously they have a much better chance at getting gainful employment and then staying free, not going back into a life of crime, and rather than being a drain of tax dollars to pay for incarceration, they could pay into the tax base. So all those are amongst the issues, and the need for prisoner reentry and just cracking down on the prisoner-on-prisoner violence and just the verbal abuse by the guards to the prisoners. So all those are, issues that I think are really of paramount importance. And so in that aspect of it, I would say that we are closer in the sense that there is a mood for criminal justice reform, which is swept the country. It has taken stage front and center. So in that aspect of it, we're a little bit closer. On the other hand, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, I just mentioned maybe 7 or 8 issues right there, and then there's a ton of wrongful conviction causes that all require remedial legislation, and that's a state by state basis. Federal legislation would only cover federal prisoners, federal cases. So in that aspect of it, we're very, very far away. One of the things I'm trying to do as an advocate is linking, the unjustifiable deadly police force and police brutality. Those things need to be linked with all these other issues and with wrongful conviction rather than looking at them in a separate pot. So the police killing people unjustified, beating them, and then planting evidence, coercing confessions, not using accurate identification procedures, lying in court. All that is all part of the same, and really that's been the problem in years gone by. I remember when I first opened my foundation back in 2011. In 2012, the rage became mass incarceration reduction, and that kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the room, and no one was talking about wrongful conviction anymore. And so this new thing with police reform, while I'm all for it and I support that, let's not forget about wrongful conviction either. Let's not forget about the issues pertaining to incarceration. And by the way, beyond the cops, let's think about the prosecutors too. And at the same time, it's not against cops and prosecutors, definitely against rogue cops and prosecutors, but the ones that do their job legitimately, that respect constitutional state rights and follow correct procedure and law, no problem with them. But the issue is that, there's too many that it does. It's not a bad apple. Bad apples, a few of them. I categorically reject that characterization. If it was a few, there wouldn't be 2,805 exonerations per the National Register of Exonerations. We wouldn't see all this brutality. You wouldn't see the deadly police force. There's a lot more than that. At the same time, it's not everybody either, but anybody in the prosecutorial or police profession that knows of misconduct and you look the other way, then to me, you're not clean. You're not good. You're part of the problem just as much as the actual criminals. That's right. I call them the criminals. When they break the law, they're a criminal also. So I think that some of the rhetoric that I've seen going on, let's defund the police, and places actually taking that to the extreme and actually dissolving. Look, if I call 911, God forbid, if I have an emergency, right, and my life's in danger, someone else's, I'm calling the cops, all right? And I don't want to be put on hold. And when there's a problem and the cop needs to show up, I want it to be a police officer. I don't want it to be a social worker. I don't want it to be a psychologist. I do want it to be a cop that's better trained, especially dealing with people with mental health crises that's going on. And I 100% want accountability. So there's all these nuances and things that I don't know is always being kept clear, front and center by the masses of the people. And so trying to cut through that and keep the message, correct and in the middle and not extreme in one side or the other has also been, one of the challenges, that I really have tried to meet to the extent that I can. But I guess all that was just to say I should have just simply told you, I think that while there's greater awareness of justice reform, I think that there's a lot of work. We're still far away. And maybe the last little thing I'll say is, when there are no asks, when there are no specific legislative changes, if there are no specific policy changes, if there are no bills, if there's no asks, if it's just general, we want police reform and that's it, this is all going to wind up going the same way that the Occupy Wall Street movement went, whereby tons of energy, tons of participation, money being thrown around left and right, but no specific ask. And at the end of the day, it fizzles and no change. And are we any the better for it today? Not that I can see. So, that's the other thing. You want changes, you want police reform, you want justice reform. We got to name the specific issues. What's the deficiencies, what's the reforms, and push those. And really too much of the reform work, in my opinion, with respect to wrongful conviction, too much of it is just about state to state. When people talk about that as a movement, we're not talking about that federally. What about the federal cases? Well, those cases suffer from the same things. When we talk about all these different justice reform issues, those apply as to the federal system, but that's not what the advocates that are working in the federal space, no one's focusing in on that. They're just focusing in on just on the state, because it's a state issue, but that still plagues the federal system. And really the thing that seems to get the most currency in terms of addressing federal cases would have to do with, the whole marijuana issue, and people incarcerated for decades and still sentenced to decades on marijuana, and mass incarceration reduction, which I'm in full support of both of those things. But what about all those other issues that are not being spoken about, not being addressed? And I really feel in closing that the polarization, the political polarization of the country right now, whereby if a Democrat introduces a bill, then that means automatically that none of the Republicans are going to agree for it. If the Republican introduces a bill, well, that means all the Democrats need to oppose it. And so it becomes not about right or wrong or criminal justice reform. It just becomes about partisan politics. And to me, that's not helpful. Right. Justice reform is critical. Okay, it's not a partisan issue. It's a human rights issue, and it should not be subjected to the ebbs and flows of political tide, whereby when one party takes power, if you were rolling and pushing and collaborating with politicians of the other side, well, then you're just going to have to wait until the political tides reverse. And if you were on the other side, no, we need to make progress by leaving all that behind. Y'all fight about all that on your own time. But for right now, right here, right now, on this issue, I'm working with who I can work with, when I can work with them, in whatever way I can work with them. Let's get all this done. But that's what I'm pushing, but that's not really what's going on. It's still too much polarization. And I just feel strongly that we need to pitch the tent and continue to push all these issues as bipartisan.
Absolutely. Thank you for that response. Very well detailed, because it's just really ridiculous. I think prison privatization of the prisons, I think that may play a huge part in it as well, where people are getting cutbacks, financial cutbacks, in that. And so, as well as all of these other things that are, going on with prison reform, and I'm pretty sure that once the prisoner may read it, what have you, in their local newspaper that they may be able to retrieve at the institution and what have you, they probably get excited, and then only to know that it's probably something that's going to be pushed back down the line. And I think that President Biden is doing a very good job of trying to bring some things to the forefront, but you have these I hate to use this word, these underdogs, if I can be able to use that term. You have underdogs where they perhaps may be working against certain things to be able to keep things maintained. Mississippi is one of the states is just terrible in their incarceration. Their living arrangements are deplorable, and I think the governor just agreed just about a couple of months ago when he got into, he's been in office for a while, but when he first got into office, no, we're not for prison reform, but he apparently some of the other legislation may have came down on him kind of hard about that and what have you, and so now he's getting into prison reform. And so, I think that it is needed here in America. I think we need to have more of it where people can have, and even with this police reform and things, my issue with that, it's ridiculous how I can be able to have other tools that is on my body, which is like I can throw spikes. I can to stop a criminal if I really want to. We have overlooked the imminent danger law. If someone is running away from you, they're no longer posing, imminent danger to you. And we have tasers, but we forget about the tasers. We forget about not the mask, but we forget about the mace that we have, and then we go straight to the gun. And I feel that it's a training issue. I feel that sometimes individuals, either they feel that they're a hero and I'm going to be a hero today, or that it may be something that they're being trained. I feel that's the reason why a lot of times you will see these individuals, they'll start to resigning. Soon as a police officer kills an individual without cause and without merit, or with some type of reason that will not fly with the public, then they'll start these directors, and also with the individuals that are on these platforms, chief of police, they'll start to resigning. I feel it's a training issue and what have you. But we've came some ways, and we need some far ways to go. So even with that, I would like for you to share as to from the prison bars to the Bar of Association as an attorney, as to the impact and empowerment it has given you. I know it has helped other individuals that your organization have exonerated or what have you, but what has this been an impact for you?
Well, I think that number one, it brings an additional layer of credibility. In addition, and beyond that, have been able to enter some of the cases as co-counsel, which, wouldn't have happened before. And in one of our cases, my entering the case as co-counsel resulted in our client being able to be given DNA testing, whereas that was, on the eve of arguing about it in court. But beyond that, I think that being an attorney has also gained me access into some unusual quarters, So what I mean by that is I have been able to serve, so attorneys, whether prosecutors, defense lawyers, or even judges, they're required to do a certain amount of what's called CLEs, continued legal education. And so I've been able to co-instruct as an instructor CLEs in front of groups of prosecutors, district attorney offices. I've been able to. I've served on the transition team for the new Westchester County District Attorney's Office, the Conviction Integrity Unit, helping to draft guidelines and recommendations for them setting up their conviction review unit. And, I did serve on the Peekskill Police Task Force Reform Group on the policy subcommittee, whereby I worked with the sitting police chief in Peekskill, which is where everything happened to me at, county police officer, retired cop, and we, was able to achieve consensus on various changes in the Peekskill Police Policy Manual. So I think that it's helped on those aspects of it. It certainly has resulted in my being able to do a lot more media and new media interviews. So there's an additional level of excitement about having me on different shows, and I'm enjoying it because I'm raising awareness, educating the public is part of doing policy work. it advances the issues. The more people are aware of issues, then the more public support we have for justice reform. As goes I, to some extent, as goes my organization, and to some extent, as goes the issue itself. So it's really helped out a lot in that aspect. But then also internally as well, it's an additional confidence level factor for me also. And I hold myself to the highest professional standards, and I don't make excuse for myself. I don't say, well, yeah, it's the best you can do considering you were locked up for 16 years wrongfully from age 17 to 32. No, I just compare myself to a regular attorney, same age as me, same level of experience, without the factoring in anything else. So I don't cut myself a break. I take pride in that, and not doing that. So I think all those ways, the law school, being an attorney and going to law school, really has helped in a lot of ways.
Okay, great. So with that being said, that's going to be the end of our show, but of course we do not allow our guests to leave the studio without them sharing as to how the audience can be able to follow them. Any books that you have published, Mr. Deskovich, you can be able to share that. Your website at this time, or any upcoming speaking engagements, you can be able to share that with the audience.
Sure. So in terms of how people can reach me, there is the website, www.descovic.org. That's DESKOVIC. I don't as yet have a book out. I do have one 95% written, but I'm waiting for the right offer to come from the right publishing company and get that in print. But in the meantime, there is a documentary short out about me, as I mentioned before. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Conviction. So people can check that out. In terms of keeping up with the advocacy work that I do have a public figure page on Facebook. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. And in terms of just support for the mission that I'm doing, and wanted to share that I work 50 to 60 hours a week. I don't. It's a labor of love. I don't get paid for it. I'm able to earn a living through certain dividends and interest that I earn every month just from some really safe investments from the compensation that I got. So my point is, all the public support that comes, 100% of it, goes to the cause of, freeing wrongfully convicted people. And we do have a Patreon page, which is for people who are willing to be recurring monthly donors. Imagine for a second, what if 25,000 people were willing to sacrifice $3 to $5 a month on a recurring basis for the purpose of freeing wrongfully convicted people, for the purpose of pushing policy changes aimed at preventing that from happening in the first place? That would give us close to $1 million budget. And who can't afford $3 or $5 in a recurring? You're going to miss that. But if enough people do that, then, we'd be able to, increase our capacity, attorneys, investigators, paralegals, other essential personnel, to really blow this thing out. If we could get these kind of results on a shoestring budget, what if we were really armed for bear? And so to that aspect of it, I hope that the listeners will see their way clear to, become recurring monthly patrons. But then beyond that, helping to share it word of mouth and social media and other ways. We got to move away from my network. We got to move into the networks of many people. And if politicians of either political party can raise tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars from what they refer to as small dollar donors, why can't we do that for criminal justice reform? Why can't we? That's not a rich person's game. Anyone who would miss $3 as an example? So we need to try to. That's part of just the challenge of trying to break through, of thinking, well, being a contributor, that's only once I make it. That's once I've arrived. That's when I'm wealthy, if I ever get to that station. No, if you can do that for the politicians, you can't. You mean to tell me you can't do that for the organizations that have a solid track record, that have a body of work, that have a budget and a plan and have the metrics? Look, this is what I would do with it. Here's how it could be judged afterwards. And can't be for that, but can be for the others. So it's kind of a question of priorities. And the last thing I'll say is this, is that we need to vote. We need to vote in favor of political candidates who are supporting justice reform, again, of either party. stop skipping out on jury duty, by the way. We need people who are going to go in there and scrutinize the prosecutor's case. If they don't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, you know what to do. On the other hand, if they do prove it, well, look, I'm not supporting people getting away with crimes neither. So if it is proven beyond, then you vote to convict. But too many times, it's not. Everyone skips out on it, and we're just left with people that are not scrutinizing, prosecutor's case, and people get convicted wrongfully all the time on really flimsy cases that should have really never been brought to court, much less turns into a conviction.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have enjoyed you today as our guest in the studio. We thank you so much, Mr. Deskovich, for being our guest here on Women Who Rock with Success, and hoping that you'll continue your endeavors to be able to help so many and to be able to bring so many out as an exoneration, so individuals can be able to get on with their lives just like you have. You've made a very big, huge landmark with your life. You did not allow it to just, lay down and, well, this is what happened. You got up and you start to running with it. And so, of course, that's what we would like for other prisoners and those that are going to be exonerated through your organization to be able to do. So thank you once again for being our guest on today, and we hope to have you back on the show real soon. So it's probably more like a Q&A for individuals on the platform. So thank you once again, and have a great day.
Have a great day. You know how to reach me. We'd love to come back to Q&A or any other purpose. Have a great one. Thank you for sharing your platform today.
You're welcome.